We're going to go through some more judgment on Israel. I know, you're shocked. But we are getting to the end, and we are, even I love in this book of Hosea particularly, you see all those glimmers of God's long-suffering, of his desire to rekindle that relationship, to reconcile that relationship with Israel. And we know that will come in the future when they finally, that stony heart of theirs is pierced, and they look upon their Messiah whom they killed, and they will return to him, and God will welcome them back. But we see that here. Look at this, just a little context. The last few verses of chapter 9. We see verse 15, we see all their wickedness is in Gilgal, for there I hated them because of the evil of their deeds. I will drive them from my house, love them no more. All their princes are rebellious. Ephraim is stricken, their root is dried up. They shall bear no fruit. Yes, were they to bear children, I would kill the darlings of their womb. My God will cast them away because they did not obey him. They shall be wanderers among the nations. And there, that last line there, that last verse in general, we see that is what ultimately happened with the Hebrew people, the Israelis. They were scattered. They were dispersed. They were sown as seeds. Remember, we saw that picture here in this prophecy. Wanderers amongst all the nations, and that is what they have done. But specifically here, we saw that they're stricken, their root is dried up, they bear no fruit. And that's a great segue, if you will, with no chapter divisions here, but we see that thought continuing on in verse 1 of chapter 10. Let's read along. It says, Israel empties his vines, he brings forth fruit for himself according to the multitude of his fruit. He has increased the altars according to the bounty of his land. They have embellished his sacred pillars. So we see here, okay, well, we know a time is coming that their root, again, speaking of all produce, all of their economy, whether it's agriculture or otherwise, it's stricken. It's going to dry up, and it will no longer produce fruit. What we see here, they're producing fruit in verse 10, but what are they doing with that fruit? He brings forth fruit, empties his vine. He harvests anything. And remember, there was strict rules on harvesting, on why, things that would fall to the ground, or the edges, the hems of the fields and whatnot. You leave that for the gleaners. We saw that in Ruth, why that was important. But here, no, he empties his vine. He harvests everything, 100% of the harvest, and he harvests it all. Not for his God, or not recognizing him. No, it's all just for himself. According to the multitude, you see that there. It's the lowercase h, the multitude of his fruit. Remember, this is the mindset of these Hebrews. Rebellious towards God, disobedient towards him, not giving him the assent of their mind in all the things that they do. No, they're just thinking with their stomachs, with their basest desires, serving only themselves, bringing fruit for themselves according to the multitude of his fruit. He's not thinking about others, or not thinking that, boy, thank God that he gave the rain and the soil and all the other conditions to produce this fruit. No, it's just the multitude of his workings. And look what he does with the fruit of his labors. He increases the altars. Now, this isn't the altars to God. No, we know this is the pagan altars here in Israel, going after the Baals, the Baal Peors, all the other false gods that they made altars to. And look here, those altars are increasing. They're getting bigger temples. They're getting more elaborate. Look, I love the last part of that. They embellish the sacred pillars. So it's one thing, okay, you go and you make a pillar to a false god. Bad enough in its own right. But no, here, all the work that they're doing, all the economic and agricultural success that they think they're having according to their good works, they're using that to embellish and make these sacred pagan altars even more elaborate and even more pompous, puffing themselves up, showing themselves ripe for destruction, is what the condition that Israel is in, that Hosea is writing to here. And look at verse 2. Their heart is divided. Now they are held guilty. He will break down their altars. He will ruin their sacred pillars. Notice the capitalization here in verse 2. It's not lowercase h, it's capital H. God is going to be the one that breaks down their altars and breaks down their embellished, pompous, sacred pillars. But here, this word divided here in verse 2, it's actually an interesting word in the Hebrew. It's halak. It means it means divided, and it carries that meaning with it, but it also means smooth. You saw that in Genesis 27:11 when they were describing Esau and Jacob. It says Esau, remember, was hairy, but Jacob was smooth. But that word also means can mean flattery, like that smooth charm that somebody might use to get out of a bad situation or try to impress people that maybe they have no right or no accomplishments to impress. It's really speaking to a division of loyalty. They're trying to play all sides of the fence. And this is exactly what Hosea is describing them as here. They are divided. Their loyalties are divided. Just as remember Hosea's wife earlier in this book, Gomer. Sure, she said she loved Hosea. She married him, and she was his wife. But was her heart genuine, sincere towards him? No. Her heart was divided. Her loyalties were other. She was trying to be smooth and trying to practice her flatteriness to others than Hosea. And this is the picture of Israel in their disobedience and rebellious state against God. They are divided in their loyalties. And we know a divided house cannot stand. And because of this division of loyalty, the flattery of their hearts, they've convinced even themselves that, well, sure, we can have these embellished sacred pillars and these huge increased altars, and we can still be considered God's people. Well, these are what all the prophets have warned Israel against, and frankly, this is a warning to us even here today. Are our hearts divided? Do we have things, sacred altars, embellished pillars? You could list a laundry list of things of sins that people could be struggling with, that their hearts divided on. Is God calling you to, or God is calling you to die to that sin, die to that sacred altar, that sacred pillar, whatever it is in your life, and express and live in sincere loyalty towards Him. And He's going to call you to break down these altars, break down these pillars, and do so in a contrite, repentant heart. And isn't that a better course of action, to do it in contrition? Because otherwise, those altars are going to be broken down. Those pillars are going to be broken down, and it can be done by yourself in repentance and sincere loyalty to God, or it will be done in judgment, and He will break down those pillars, just as He did here for Israel. And this is coming in judgment, which is much rougher than any contrition or repentance might be. Heart is divided, no different than what Jeremiah said in 17:9. Actually, I love to look there. It's a great verse. We quote it often, but it says that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Desperately wicked and deceitful. Do you think that's divided and smooth and flattery? Oh, but just listen to your heart. Just follow your heart. Well, biblical advice would be just the opposite of that. No, your heart is a liar. It's a flatterer. It's trying to be smooth and trying to get you divided in your loyalties. But who can know it? God can know it. He is the righteous divider, knowing the heart and dividing the soul from the spirit. And He knows us, and to Him we should give our loyalty. Verse 3 now. For now they say, we have no king because we did not fear Yahweh. And as for a king, what would he do for us? Well, you see, this isn't too many generations departed when they were clamoring the same thing, but they they were trying to bring a king up upon them, which was contrary to what God wanted. You remember in the time of Judges? No, they wanted to be a king, not to follow a godly king, in the same vein of Christ, our King, but no, they wanted a king to be like the other nations. See, they were always concerned about not how they appeared before God, but how they appeared before men. And again, that human nature crept up in Israel, and they wanted to be like the others, be like all the nations surrounding them, and give us a king. Well, they had that, and look what they did with it. Kept up in their wanton disobedience towards God, and now they complain they have no king, not because they were under a system of judges, no, because foreigners came in and conquered them, and now they have no Jewish king, no Hebrew king. And what was the cause of that? Because their lack of the fear of the Lord, their lack of reverence towards Him and acknowledging Him in all their ways, resulted in this judgment on the Israelites. Verse 4, it says, they have spoken words, swearing falsely and making a covenant. The judgment springs up like hemlock in the furrows of a field. So just like a freshly plowed field, you go through with your disc, with your plow, and it turns up that top few inches of soil. And well, what's underneath that few inches of topsoil? But it's all the different weed seeds that are out there, all the seeds that would choke out your the crop that you want to plant. But as soon as you plow that ground, all of those seeds get brought to the surface and they germinate quickly and they spring up right in the middle of the field if nothing else is done about that. If proper weed control care isn't taken, this is describing the iniquities and the sins, and this is specifically the judgment that was brought about by those iniquities and sins, covering those fields, coming up like the hemlock weeds in the plowed field. Verse 5 now, it says, the inhabitants of Samaria fear because of the calf of Beth-aven. For its people mourn for it, and its priests shriek for it, because its glory has departed from it. Look at that there. All these sacred altars and sacred pillars, embellished calves. Beth-aven, here, this town. Remember, these cities have names, and oftentimes these names have a great meaning to it. And we've heard Beth, remember, in a number of different cities. Bethlehem, Bethel, and Beth literally just means house of. So Bethel, which actually you see down in it's right down in verse 15, is he references Bethel, house of God. But Beth-aven here, aven literally means vanity, emptiness. So how fitting is it that all this calf worship here in the north is in the town of the house of vanity? How fitting. And look, all the people have their emotions and all of their desires wrapped up in this calf worship, because look, when it fails, when its glory departs from it, oh, the people mourn. Oh, maybe they realize that, wow, just the glory of God never departed, the true God, but this calf, it's that gold is getting tarnished, or maybe it got knocked down, carried away, stolen, whatever it may be, the glory's gone from it. Well, can someone knock down or tarnish or steal the God of heaven? No, but Israel's finding out here a quick lesson that worshiping vanity in the house of vanity, worshiping that calf, and can you picture vanity is the perfect description of this type of worship, because these are mainly farmers. It's mainly an agricultural society, so they're raising their cows, and they probably have an ox or two that they plow these furrows in the field. They're working behind all day, these beasts of burdens that are used and abused. Well, then those same farmers turn around and bow down to a golden image of the same animal they were stuck behind smelling the farts of all day long. How vain it is, and how but it shows you how deceptive, right, the heart of man is, because it can deceive them into worshiping that creature, worshiping that calf, and trying to embellish it, trying to make it more glorious with your own hands instead of worshiping the God of heaven that has no need for embellishment because his glory is all his own. But pure vanity, and the priests shrieking. I love that picture there that it paints in your head. All of these pompous, you can imagine the robes and all the if they were embellishing their pillars and altars, surely these priests had to be embellished themselves. How else would you have that appearance of religiosity? Oh, and then when their false religion falls around them, the glory departs from it. The shrieking that they must have done. Well, we see here that they are the prime ones responsible for this, the leaders, the priests, those that lead Israel astray. We see here nationally terrible judgments for the nation as a whole, but these priests, these false priests that were at the tip of the spear, leading the people away from God towards this vain worship of calves and other pagan idols, they're the ones that are going to face the strictest judgment. So they have a good reason to be shrieking crybabies here, as we see in verse 5. Verse 6, we see here, the idol also shall be carried to Assyria as a present for King Jareb. See here, they set up their alternate points of worship contrary to God's command. Well, here's another result of that. Those idols will be that they thought that they that we're making them like the other nations, and we're giving them all this prosperity that they were currently enjoying. Well, those idols that they had so much hope in are such nothingness that they're just going to be carried away. I mean, sure, yeah, the King Jareb here will take it as a present, but he's not really interested in the figurine or whatever, but it's mostly just the value of the gold. No doubt that he is primarily interested in here. And we see that it's a shameful account because, first of all, the very thing that they acted in disobedience against, that's the thing that they put more love in than their love for God. Well, that very thing is the thing that is before their eyes, taken from them. How much shame they must feel, as we see there. Ephraim shall receive shame. Israel shall be ashamed of his own counsel. There's nothing really else less to feel than, boy, we really screwed up here. And you hope that would be the best response to it, is shame. But we see here that there were more people mourning. There were more people thinking, why would God do this to us? Well, we're 10 chapters in here, and we know this is just a small window into the iniquity of Israel and their rebellion against God. So again, shame would be the best thing that they could feel in this case. As for Samaria, her king is cut off like a twig on the water. Other translations call it like foam, or just like a bubble on the water. It comes up and then boop, it's gone. That's going to be how quickly and how quickly forgotten even this king of Samaria that's cut off will be. Also, verse 8. Also, the high places of Avon, the sin of Israel, shall be destroyed. The thorn and thistle shall grow on their altars. They shall say to the mountains, cover us, and to the hills, fall on us. So again, we see here in the high places of vanity, all those high places that were centers for pagan worship, they think in their minds that, if we get higher, well, surely God will be able to hear us more because we're closer to him. Again, vain thinking, not having that lack of knowledge. Right? Remember, this is the reason we saw in Hosea that people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge of God. As if it's in that lack of knowledge that they think that they have to go to these high places to better worship God. Well, no, this is a lack of knowledge of the true omnipresent God. And for this, rightly called a sin of Israel, those high places are going to be destroyed. And all of those altars, those sacred altars that were increased and were built bigger and more beautiful, Well, it just takes a couple of years, and nature's going to take its own course on it. Thorns and thistles. You can put, and if you see that just an abandoned lot in a city or something, you think it's asphalt, concrete, paved over. It doesn't have to sit more than a couple of years, and the cracks of that concrete and the cracks of that asphalt, things germinate, things pop up in there, and it wouldn't take more than 10 years, and that fully paved city lot can be overgrown, and things popped up right through that pavement that looks so permanent. But
look at McClough Steel; it looks like a jungle.
Yeah, that's a great point. You don't have to drive very far to see evidence of this. That thorns and thistles have no problem taking over the things that man built and thought were so certain to be around forever. Well, it shows the futility of man. But this last part of verse 8 here, they'll say to the mountains, cover us, and the hills fall on us. Literally, they're seeing the judgment coming around on them, and the mindset of the people would be, it would be better for the mountains to just all break apart and bury us in their rubble than for this judgment to come upon us. So this is the level of desperation that we'll see that Israel will face when this judgment comes upon them. Any other questions or comments on anything we've covered? Go ahead.
You've alluded to several times, this book is kind of a microcosm of, Israel's unfaithfulness. And in verse 2 here, their heart is divided, now they're held guilty. It's also kind of a microcosm of Israel throughout their entire history, like the book of Judges. Every 40 years, their heart went away from God, and they went after false gods and idols, and God had to bring them back over and over again. And then in way back in 1 Kings 18, Elijah tells the people, I have it here. He asks them, now this is a great scene.
What's that reference again, Phil?
18 verse 21, 1 Kings 18, 21. Elijah came to all the people. Now, this is on Mount Carmel, remember, with the 450 priests of Baal?
Uh-huh.
And he comes to all the people and he says, how long will you falter between two opinions? If Yahweh is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him. Make up your mind, Israel. And then, you know the story from there. He had water poured on his wooden altar and sacrifice. And they cut themselves and danced around the.
I would say the priests were shrieking then too.
Yeah, shrieking around the altar, right?
Yeah.
And of course you know the end of the story there. But their heart is divided. Now they're held guilty, and it's just like what the prophet Elijah said. But it really is this book and its unfaithfulness toward their God, like we see in the New Testament. These people are honoring me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. This is really Israel.
Really Israel and really humanity. I mean, it's that double, that divided nature, wanting to serve two masters. And the proverb tells us a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. And it's so many examples from Israel's history and then in the New Testament, how God calls us to do exactly the opposite of this, not be divided in our minds, but be unified, one accord under him. Thank you for that, Phil. All right. Verse 9. It says, O Israel, you have sinned from the days of Gibeah. There they stood. The battle of Gibeah against the children of iniquity did not overtake them. When it is my desire, I will chasten them. People shall be gathered against them when I bind them for their two transgressions. So we see here, remember we referenced that Gibeah last time. That's back in Judges, and a horrific sin. Not going to go back there to read it, but a horrific sin. And again, Hosea is referencing that, sinning as in the days of Gibeah, showing how they haven't improved as a society. They haven't been contrite in their hearts. And look, he even says here, there they stood in the battle, and did not overtake them, because that judgment is coming specifically in God's time. Like it says in verse 10, when it is my desire. So you can go on and you can commit your iniquities, and you can think, like they've said before. They think, oh well, there's no mind of God. He's not going to remember these sins. Well, we see here that he remembers the sins you did generations ago back in Gibeah, Israel, and you think your sins today are going to be just forgotten about? No. But like he says here, in his timing, when it is his desire, chastening will come. Punishment and judgment will come for the iniquity of Israel. And it says here, look at this, peoples will be gathered against them. Well, have people been gathered against Israel for millennia now? And it continues to this day. Well, when his desire comes to turn that chastening fully up, then it will come. That's only in God's timing. But again, it is for their transgressions, for their two transgressions. And it's not that there were only two. It just means that multitude of transgressions. They will be bound, and there won't be any recourse for them other than repenting and accepting their Messiah. Yeah.
This two transgressions makes me think of, and I don't know the reference in Jeremiah, but where Jeremiah says, "For my people have committed two evils. They've forsaken the fountain of living waters, and they want
Gone for the cisterns.
the cistern, yeah, the empty cisterns that can hold no water. In other words, the idols, the Baals, the false gods, and they rejected him. Perhaps that's what's alluded to here with the two evils.
Sure.
Going after false gods, and it's rejecting him.
No, and that makes sense in the division, right? The heart being divided. Well, that division speaks of a binary system, right? You're not only choosing these false gods to go after, but you're also committing, like you said, the second transgression. So I think that would fit accurately there. You're rejecting God, and you're also working for the devil, which by nature you're going to do. And even if you reject God and never go bow down to some golden calf, or, well, there is some sin in your life that is contrary to God. So you are worshiping that in whatever capacity more than following God. So that is a great division, a great point to bring out. All right, verse 11 now. Verse 11 says, Ephraim is a trained heifer that loves to thresh the grain. So a trained heifer, someone that has and threshing the grain is not the hardest. It's not, if you're a beast of burden, if you're a trained cow, threshing the grain is a fairly easy, and actually, if you're a cow, a desirable job, right? You're on the grain floor and you're just walking around in a circle, but you're a cow. So what else are you going to do? And you're right there with the food. You're right there with the food, and they're going to keep that cow fed so it can thresh out the rest of the grain. Well, that's the nice, relatively soft life that Ephraim was enjoying here. But look at the last part. But I harnessed her fair neck. I will make Ephraim pull a plow. Judah shall plow. Jacob shall break his clods. And if anyone's ever had to break some sod, break some ground, even just to put in a small garden, it's not easy work. It's not that you turn over those clods of sod, and you gotta break them up multiple times. It's tough work. So Ephraim here is going from the nice cushy grain floor to a harsh plow put about her neck, and they're made to break the ground, pulling a plow, breaking the clods. In verse 12 it says, "Sow for yourselves righteousness, reap in mercy, break up your fallow ground. For it is time to seek Yahweh till he comes and rains righteousness on you." What a beautiful verse here. And especially, carrying on the last part of verse 11, pulling a plow, breaking ground, breaking up the fallow ground, like it's told here in verse 12. It's not easy work. But it's fruitful work if you're doing it, sowing the right seeds. right? Not sowing the whirlwind like we saw a few chapters back, sowing iniquity like Israel has been doing. But no, sow seeds of righteousness, and you'll reap in mercy. And to do that first, you can't just go out in your backyard and just throw grass down, or throw seeds down. The grass is going to choke it out. You might have a couple things pop up here or there, but they won't have much production. No, you should break up your fallow ground. And this is, again, speaking to the fallow ground of our hearts. Otherwise, you will be that fallow ground is going to be broken up, just like it says here in verse 2. The altars are going to be broken down, the pillars as well. Either God's going to do it or you're going to do it willfully. It's better to be here in verse 12, willfully breaking up your fallow ground, willfully sowing seeds for righteousness, and sowing seeds of righteousness. Just like sowing crops, you can't just throw a seed out there and expect, okay, where's my mercy, where's my righteousness? Well, no, even in crops it takes a season, right? And some of the things, if you're planting an orchard or a vineyard, those take years to get your first fruit. But keep sowing those seeds of righteousness. And again, this is speaking metaphorically of sowing seeds of righteousness into the community, in our conversations with people. What kind of seeds are we sowing out there? And you can't just have somebody that may have a question or a curiosity about the gospel and expect to, give them the best answer you have, and then, then they automatically turn their lives around and accept Christ. And not that can't happen, but we can't be sowing in the business of sowing seeds, thinking that all the righteousness and mercy and the benefit and the reward and harvest is going to come right away. No, it's going to come just as judgment's going to come when it's his desire. It's going to come in God's timing. But our command still is to sow seeds, reaping in mercy and waiting for his return. Now is the time to seek the Lord, just as Hosea says, and that command is true as much today as it was when Hosea wrote these words. But we seek the Lord, sowing seeds of righteousness, waiting for him to come and give the increase. You see, that's what Israel was doing here. They were sowing their seeds, they were tending their vines, and they were getting their fruit, using it all for themselves, thinking nothing of God in what they did, or giving him any acknowledgement for the literal rain that he would give for those crops to succeed. Well, here if you're sowing seeds of righteousness, if you're following him, if your heart's not divided, he will rain righteousness on you. And boy, does he ever. But unfortunately, so we have this great gem here, verse 12 of how we should live and how well it will be for us, just as it would have been for Israel if they would continue on sowing seeds of righteousness. But look what they did. Verse 13, you have plowed wickedness. You have reaped iniquity. You have eaten the fruit of lies. Listen, look at those three lines there. Wickedness, iniquity, and lies. That's what their business is. Plowing, reaping, and eating. Nothing but wickedness, iniquity, and lies. Well, what caused this? Look at the last part of verse 13. Because you've trusted in your own way, in the multitude of your mighty men. Here's what it gets back to. Trusting not in God, acknowledging not in his action, in activity in their lives to give the rain, to give all the blessings, to give the increase of the crops, to have conditions of peace and security, if that's what God would will it. No, they're trusting just in their faculties, in the multitude of their mighty men. Whatever their way said was right, well, that's what they're trusting in. Well, that we see what that path got them. It got them wickedness, iniquity, and lies. And this is what happens to any man that fails to trust in God, fails to seek him and his wisdom and his guidance, but just trust in their own way and in the multitude of their strength. Again, you see how far departed Israel is from God in this book here. Therefore, verse 14, tumult shall arise among your people. All your fortresses shall be plundered. Fortresses, speaking of the multitude of their mighty men, built up all these things that, to the world's eye would say, well, wow, that's a pretty secure nation. They got, fortresses. They got a good economy, good agriculture, and everything else. well, all these things that they trusted in will come to nothing because all their fortresses are going to be overtaken. This tumult will come amongst the whole people. The whole society will be overthrown by it. And this invading force, all their fortresses that they trusted in, shall be plundered. He goes on, he says, as Shalman plundered Beth Arbel in the day of battle, a mother dashed in pieces upon her children. Terrible, terrible scene, terrible picture here, but this is speaking to the totality of judgment that's coming upon Israel. Even a mother hovering over her children to try to protect them in this terrible scene, well, they'll be dashed all together in pieces. Thus, verse 15, thus it shall be done to you, O Bethel, because of your great wickedness. At dawn, the king of Israel shall be cut off utterly. So we see here they've taken this Bethel, they've taken this house of God, entered in their own idolatry, their own pagan worship here, besmirching the name and still thinking that it was okay to call it the house of God. Well, no, they were bringing their pollutants in to the house of God. And because of that, because of, as he calls it rightly here, a great wickedness, their king and their society around them will be cut off utterly. Now, we're at we got maybe a minute, probably not even a minute, but I did want to look at verse 1 of this next chapter here. And I'll get into this next time, but it's timely here. Look at verse 1 of chapter 11. It says, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Now here in chapter 11, we're going to kind of turn towards the end of this book, and we're going to see God's going to show how his love for Israel continues, how it's enduring. And he's going back here to this first scene, remember, in Israel, called up out of Egypt. But I bet you wouldn't think, reading through here, that in Hosea chapter 11, we get to see a messianic writing. Out of Egypt, I called my son. Flip forward with me to Matthew 2, if you will. Matthew 2. I had to do something to try to make this, we're going through Hosea. I mean, there's not a lot of Christmas stuff in here. I did my best, but we see here, the story. Now, this is not quite Christmas because this is a little bit after his incarnation, after his birth, but this is still pretty early in Jesus' life. So give me a little leeway here. But look at Matthew 2:15. You remember when Christ was born, and King Herod knew that this Messiah was born in his region. He was born in his kingdom, and look at verse 13 of Matthew 2. So now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph, saying, arise, take the young child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I bring you word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. So you see here, Herod wants to destroy all the young males in his kingdom so he could kill the Messiah, kill the rival to his throne. And now verse 14, when he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod. So no short amount of time. They were there for a little while. Was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, out of Egypt I called my son. So we see that here in the midst of all this judgment and all the wickedness we're reading about Israel. We'll see more as we get into the next chapters of Hosea, but God still has his love for them and has an everlasting love for us, and he saw fit to point out what he was going to do in showing that love by calling his son back up out of Egypt, even though he sent him there for the first time to save him from Herod. In his love, he's calling him out of Egypt so that he might grow up to one day give his life to save the world. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, Brother Dave, would you mind closing us in a word of prayer?
Gracious Lord, we just humbly come before you this day. We just thank you for all the wonderful blessings that you give us. And we know, like Israel, Son and the light that we are. We pray as you go into the second service that your hand will be upon that service and your name will be glorified. In Jesus' precious name.
Amen.